Welcome to another edition of the Willie Bragg Show. I am your host, Willie Bragg, and today, once again, returning is Joey Mulkerin, and we're going to be discussing, the birth and death of the Bernie Sanders movement. When did it exactly begin, and when was that um nail coffin, or is it still alive with us? I think that's something that we need to talk about. And I thought Joey would be like just the right person to do this with today. So, just in case, since the last time you've been here, I had a slight upsurge of subs. So, just in case people don't know who you are, just go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get started underway.
Sure thing. My name is Joey Mulkerin. I'm a freelance journalist, longtime left-wing activist. I was involved in the Occupy movement. I've been involved in Black Lives Matter, union organizing, and DSA, and above all, I guess, the Bernie movement. So that's why I'm very excited to be here and talk about it today. I mean, I was politically active, politically aware before Bernie, but I think that his campaign was just a generationally catalyzing moment. It was formative for me and many other people. And I think that, even if we didn't have the success we would have liked in terms of Bernie, actually being elected president, and even though things are looking not great right now, I do think that there is reason to be hopeful. I mean, I'm sorry, though. I realize this was just supposed to be an introduction, but yeah, I'm just really, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So great.
All right. No, that's okay. Everything you said is great intro. And basically, thing about it is, I may have been a little bit longer at this Bernie thing than you have, but that's fine. I mean, you were around before this. What I felt like was the modern Bernie movement taking place in all its capacity, its ups and its downs, and this is why we're here to see where this movement can go, and what have you. So I would say, for me personally, I was all into the Bernie Sanders going back to the 1990s. So I've been pretty old school at this, but I think that, in my opinion, and I think that the modern movement basically started around the time of Occupy. Where do you stand on that?
I agree completely. I think that Occupy was a revolutionary moment in political consciousness, really. And I say that as someone who was in college at the time, and I just noticed how radically people's consciousness, the consciousness of your average 20-something millennial, transformed right then. Because, okay, I went to the New School, which obviously has a reputation as a very left-wing university. A lot of the stereotypical stuff conservatives like to make fun of now, like pronouns and what have you, originated at the New School, and some of it originated pre-Occupy. And I was involved in anti-war organizing there. And I remember that before 2011, activists or anyone slightly to the left of a mainstream liberal was still just kind of mocked. I mean, a lot of students were liberal or libertarian or just apathetic, and it was disheartening to be an activist. But when Occupy happened, I saw just an amazing revolutionary transformation of consciousness overnight. I remember just all of a sudden it became commonplace for people to talk about how they were getting screwed by capitalism and by student loan debt, and there were just, I just feel that immediately after Occupy, membership in DSA, membership in other left-wing organizations surged, and I think that laid the foundation for there to be a Bernie Sanders movement beginning in the 2016 primaries.
Well, for me, as I said, in 1990, was aware of the of a socialist running for the U.S. House of Representatives in Vermont. And some people in the media was like, "Oh my God, I think he might win. Oh my goodness, this guy might win." And the Soviet Union just collapsed basically. Well, the Soviet Union was still technically in existence in 1990, but the Cold War was pretty much over. And I remember, people saying, "How in the world could this be? We have defeated the Soviets, and there is somebody in the United States that's calling themselves a socialist that has a realistic chance of getting elected." And they were acting like the sky was falling and everything. I was a generic liberal at the time, and just like actually, I went to college a little bit late, so I was just before I went to college. And I was just kind of like, oh my goodness, this is interesting. And then I found out, did a little bit of research, and this was before the internet, so it took an undertaking, but I read up about him, and I was like, okay. I was a liberal at the time, and I was just like, he's not so scary. What's so scary about this guy? And then as Bill Clinton got elected president, and I realized he's carrying the Reagan Revolution, and I argued that Joe Biden is the 11th term of the Reagan presidency. So, and which is sad. And I mean, this country cannot move beyond Reaganism, and the Democratic Party can't move beyond the Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, hostage taking of the institutions. I felt like through the Democratic Leadership Council, and a lot of people today don't even know what the hell I'm talking about when I talk about the Democratic Leadership Council. But after 2 years of Bill Clinton, I'm like, Reagan and Bush is still, their policies are still intact. Nothing's happening. We don't have universal health care, and the country's moving further right. The Republicans just took over Congress in 1994. Well, fuck it all. I'm a socialist, like everybody told me. And I ended up joining the Socialist Party, and then over the years, just kept up with Bernie Sanders. Even after I parted ways from the Socialist Party, and when he ran in 2015, I was shocked on how well he did, and but he did, and so he done so well that he was cheated twice out of the nomination, and I felt like when he dropped out the second time, in my view, I think Occupy kind of started the whole thing going, and then I'm sorry, I'm running my mouth. And then
no, you're fine.
And I felt like that the movement kind of died, even though he didn't have a position one way or the other as a senator. I felt like the movement died when the left, the online left, and the squad could not meet eye to eye on things like forced to vote. I think that forced to vote, those who advocated it, that was the kind of like the last dying breath of the Bernie movement, in my view.
Well, I would argue that the Bernie movement has evolved, and I think that force the vote. It would have been nice if we had been able to do that, but ultimately that would have just been a symbolic vote, and I think it's too pessimistic to some extent to claim that alone represented the death of the movement. I think that, Bernie, it's unfortunate that we weren't able to transform the political system as quickly as we would have liked, but for better or worse, we've seen how corrupt, how fundamentally undemocratic the Democratic Party is, and I think that, in the same way I talked about how Occupy led to a revolutionary change in consciousness, I think the Bernie movement itself did, and a lot of the best Bernie organizers have gone in other directions. in terms of union organizing. I mean, I know people who were involved in the Bernie movement that helped to organize Amazon, and having Chris Smalls, having a new generation of radical labor leaders, I think is transformative. And I think that long term, I think ultimately it's a mistake to place too much emphasis on electoral activism. I think that I think that people are working now to build stronger labor unions. We need more of that. We need stronger working class institutions, mutual aid societies. And long term, I am open to building a leftist third party, or, in cases where for pragmatic reasons it would be necessary, running as a Democrat. But I think before we get there, we ultimately need to just build a stronger working class base of support. And that involves direct action, which ultimately goes beyond the electoral system. And I do think there are reasons to be hopeful on that front. And I also think there are reasons to be hopeful when we see, the radical, how widespread the opposition to the horrors of what Israel's doing in Gaza right now is. I mean, just how widespread, there's been a lot of the same activists who came up through the Bernie Sanders movement are also playing a role in that. So, these are very bleak times, obviously, between Biden and Trump. But I think that long term, there are reasons to be hopeful.
I do think that there's been improvements made in for example, saying that you were for Medicare for all in 2004, people would be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Kind of a look in the face.
Yeah.
To now where you can say I'm for Medicare for all, and you're not looked upon like the crazy man in the room. There's been that kind of improvement. The conversation has shifted nationally, and that's a positive thing. People are not like, "Oh my God, you're a socialist" anymore. That's cosmetically in our society. That's kind of changed with the national conversation. I think that the mainstream media and the two-party system overall did not want to have. And Bernie Sanders, to his credit, did force the conversation. He's it's a good point what you brought out about the Gaza, because there's been a revolt in the Democratic Party among its left wing over the grassroots left, not necessarily those in the halls of Congress, but the grassroots left has been pretty much saying this is bullshit, and Biden better listen. He better listen to that base, or this orange creature may be coming back. And none of whether we want to work with in the Democratic Party or outside the Democratic Party, none of us, I don't think, wants the orange creature to come back.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that would be horrifying. Obviously, when you look at some of the things Trump is proposing, like Project 2025, which would be horrifying, which would lead to civil servants at the Labor Department, the EPA, all being fired and replaced with climate denying, union busting zealots, and so that is very bleak. But it's just really horrifying how little choice it does feel like we have, particularly on foreign policy, when you basically look at Biden giving a blank check to Netanyahu to commit genocide. And obviously Trump is just as terrible on that front. So, I get why people feel disheartened right now. And I guess, my message to people who are feeling discouraged is to just recognize that whoever wins, we're going to have a huge fight on our hands, and we should be prepared, to fight for a better tomorrow, to fight for socialism in the long run, and to be able to challenge, whoever wins in November, because yeah, long term, I think there's reason to be hopeful, but short term, yeah, things are looking pretty bleak.
Project 2025 is pretty damn scary. Anything that comes out of the Heritage Foundation is bad news for this country, even when it comes to healthcare. I mean, because I remember how a lot of people got triggered. A lot of right leaning people got triggered when I said Obamacare is not Obamacare. It's Romney care. It actually got it started with the Heritage Foundation, and people got triggered over that. But this Project 2025 is a whole new category of to be concerned about. Um, I think that it's federally that they want to do this shit, but I think they also want to do this in various state governments too, and it's a very regardless of who wins in this presidential election. That doesn't mean that Project 25 would be defeated if Biden somehow or another Democrat was. Let's face it, I would not be surprised if there's a replacement candidate by the Democratic convention, because Biden's cognitive skills is definitely in question. But I will say, with regard to Benjamin Netanyahu, both both Biden and Trump are pretty much the same. The only positive thing I could say about Trump is that Trump did tell Netanyahu to fuck off after the 2020 election. You know about that, right?
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. Yeah, that's so
as hell.
Even a broken clock.
Well, he did it not for the right reasons, but it was because he congratulated Biden's win in on election day, and it was kind of like, well, I had your back, and you went and congratulated Biden. You know, well, he could fuck off. I was like, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I agree. Fuck Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, obviously for the wrong reasons. I mean, given that Trump was probably the most pro-Israel president in history. I mean, when it comes to moving the embassy and everything.
Well, I think they're all pro Israel. I mean, it's and especially in today's world, to be pro Israel when what is being done is without question, it is a genocide. And so just I wish that Bernie Sanders would be a little less timid on the issue. But I understand that people are fearful of being called anti-Semitic, which is weird because Bernie Sanders is Jewish, and not only is he Jewish, he actually lived in a kibbutz in the 1960s, and he's got friendly ties with the political party Meretz over there.
And on top, no, I'm sorry, go on.
No, that's I was just wanted to point that out. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's true. And to add on top of that, I mean, I think that many Zionists themselves are fundamentally anti-Semitic. There's a reason that evangelicals support Israel. There's a reason people like Steve Bannon support Israel, because fundamentally they don't want Jews in America or in Europe. They want Jews to live in Israel. And I think, Zionists themselves recognize it, and Zionists hate, I mean, I'm Jewish. Zionists hate people like me who are anti-Zionist Jews in some ways more than they hate anti-Semites. And that's why they'll gladly throw us under the bus by allowing the right to come to power, as long as they're pro-Israel, even if they are anti-Semitic. I mean, there's a reason that Netanyahu is close with leaders like Viktor Orban of Hungary, who is overtly anti-Semitic. So that is just the most cynical accusation. I mean, I've met so many Palestinian activists who are committed to fighting anti-Semitism, and when anti-Semitism does emerge, to rooting it out of their movement. In some ways, because I think, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans in general, have faced discrimination, and they've been blamed for things they had no part in. So they understand that to be Jewish is not to be a Zionist.
Actually, that's very true. And people make the assumptions that everybody who's Palestinian somehow, not only are they Muslim, but they're like the most theologically radicalized version of it, which is just not true. Yeah, you got the fanatics that do exist, but you also have people who are just no more Muslim than a Christian who goes to church on Sunday type. You have a lot of secular Palestinians. You have a lot of Christian Palestinians, and for these evangelicals to be like not give a damn about their fellow Christians just because they happen to be born Palestinian. There's a lot of well, not a lot, but there are even Jews who are Palestinian. So just to kind of paint a broad stroke, just to kind of make assumptions and project into a group of people. I mean, that's ridiculous. And
I think I'm sorry, I think that's an important point to make. I mean, particularly the thing about Palestinian Christians, which is why it's so maddening that evangelicals are so fanatically pro-Israel. I mean, hell, Palestine is like the one place in the world that you could say Christianity is actually an indigenous religion too.
Yep, absolutely. And in Israel, there is discrimination against Christians, just as there are in a lot of other countries in the Middle East. But the evangelicals, the people who are so concerned about the killing of the unborn, not care that there are children dying in Gaza. And even from a national security standpoint, the slaughter that's going on is just bad policy, because you think any anti-Semitism that exists in Gaza right now is a problem. You're going to have a bunch of radicalized kids that when they grow up, that's going to be that's going to be a problem, and it's a problem caused by it's caused by Israel. It's caused by the United States having Israel's back.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Zionists on the far right. We're talking about worse than just quote unquote the far right, or that's maybe or maybe not racist, but the actual racist right, because like the National Front in France, which is now the National Rally. I mean, they're Holocaust denying, types. They basically support Israel, but that's because they want the Jews to go there and leave France. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So that is a very good point you brought out there and everything. And I had a guest a couple of months ago. Are you familiar with Jen Perlman?
Yeah, she's running against Debbie Washing Machine Schultz in Florida, and I would make a plug and recommend that progressives who have a few bucks to spare help her campaign out. If you really, speaking of the Bernie movement, if you really want to stick it to one of the main enemies of the Bernie movement, supporting her campaign would be a good way. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Go on.
Oh no, that's fine. She's been on my show, and she said herself she's Jewish, and she said that she used to be indoctrinated as a Zionist, but realized down the road that it was an indoctrination, and it's not. I mean, it's going to sound weird, but it's not a Jewish. It's not. It's separate from Judaism. Is what she's saying. And she said that Jews are not victims, but they are survivors. And and she's kind of badass. I enjoyed talking to her and all of that. And I just contacted them last week. There, some point she's gonna come back on the show. So so that'd be
that's
interesting.
wonderful. Yeah,
Debbie,
I'm a big fan of hers.
Blabbermouth Schultz. I despise Debbie Wasserman Schultz. When every time I see Debbie Wasserman Schultz, this is what I think of: Chelsea Clinton at the age of 70 meets a cocker spaniel.
That is accurate.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking at Chelsea Clinton as an old decrepit woman that's been crossbreed with a cocker spaniel. That's what I think of when I see that.
Yeah. And we just, remember how, in 2016, since we are talking about the Bernie Sanders movement, she was obviously the DNC chairwoman at the time. And honestly, one of the people most responsible for giving us Trump, I would argue, because if you look at polling in 2016, Bernie always polled much better against Trump than Hillary did, but the Democrats basically decided that she was entitled to the nomination and that they would rather risk losing with her as they did than winning with Bernie Sanders. And that's what people don't realize about the establishment of the Democratic Party, I think, including people on the left who think that, say, losing an election to send a message to them is a good strategy, which I understand from a strategic perspective, but the mistake they made is thinking that the Democrats actually are invested in winning. I mean, I think some Democrats are, and they're just misguided. I think others, like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, others, at the top of the party establishment hierarchy, genuinely don't care about winning. They genuinely care more about preserving their power within the party. I mean, it's kind of funny. I remember, like, when Bernie was leading the second time in the run-up to 2020, there was a quote from some Democratic consultant who, kind of said the quiet part loud and said they were afraid that if Bernie won, like, they would lose their potential to get an ambassadorship to a barista at Starbucks. I wish I had the exact quote handy, but I think that reveals the mindset of them, is that they genuinely, wanted to keep the riffraff out of, positions of power in the party. And that, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and obviously then Tom Perez is another example of that. And we saw in 2017 and 2018, they purged most Bernie staffers from the DNC, and that, I think, was a precursor to what happened in 2020 when, Obama got all of the candidates to drop out and endorse Biden, which was, for it was just the most unprecedented move in history. I mean, for a candidate who won the first three primaries to not basically be considered the presumptive nominee, it says something about how much their thumbs were on the scale.
It's really interesting because 2020 was more significant in some ways than 2016, because 2016 it happened. He came out of the blue, and a lot of people were just like hyped up about Bernie Sanders and everything. I do think there was a significant faction of people that voted for Bernie Sanders because they hated Hillary Clinton, which I've always hated Hillary Clinton, but that was a candidate I totally believed in. And I was like, wow, I just thought he was going to be Dennis Kucinich redux or something like that, and he was going to go away, is what I thought. But I mean, he stuck around, and he was able to galvanize and all of that. But by 2020, it was like he was not going to repeat the mistakes he made in 2016. Those were not mistakes. Those were his those were his strongest attributes. That was his strength right there. His independent zeal that was largely diminished in 2020. He was like trying to cross his T's and dot his I's, and I think that kind of that he was trying to be overly careful, and he had a lot of advantages he didn't have in 2020, and I still stand by this. I'm pissed with Tulsi Gabbard right now. Believe me when I say that. But I do express still to this day admiration for her exposing to the world what the DNC was doing to Bernie in 2016. And I think that when she ran in 2020 or 2019, she was running not for the presidential nomination. I felt like she was running for the VP spot or spot in a Sanders administration. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. And one thing I will add in response to something you said earlier is that like you were talking about how in 2016 a lot of people supported Bernie because they hated Hillary. I think that that's true, and that actually was one of his weaknesses in 2020, because I noticed that there were different factions of Bernie supporters from 2016 who in 2020, some went to Warren, others did go to Tulsi or Andrew Yang, some even went to Biden, because that's the thing. There were conservative and centrist Democrats who were just anti Clinton and weren't necessarily committed to the Bernie movement. And yeah, Tulsi Gabbard is someone who I'm disappointed with, because I think that she is fundamentally a conservative to some degree, but I do agree with you that she had a few good moments in the past, like in terms of exposing the DNC. And I also did like when she stood up to Kamala Harris in one of the debates. So yeah, I agree with that. And another point, though, I think that Bernie was running a bit too close to the Democratic establishment in 2020, but in other ways, I actually think he was braver. Like I appreciated that he seemed to move to the left somewhat on immigration. He seemed to move to the left somewhat on foreign policy and on prison reform. I think he ran a very gutsy campaign in 2020. I think he just had a lot going against him in terms of, as we talked about, much of his base from 2016 peeling off to other candidates. And, I have read also that there were structural problems with the campaign too, that, in Iowa, they didn't have field offices open in rural counties, and the campaign laid a lot of people off at one point. So I think there were, structural problems, but generally I think, I think in a lot of ways, other than I guess, maybe cozying up a bit too much to the establishment, I think he moved left in 2020.
Was kind of funny about who to blame about this sort of thing. I think that Tulsi was actually kind of she was like the attractive bulldog for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was there to kind of keep things a cut above, to cut above the fray. She was there to tear out some of these people. She plucked Kamala out of the way. She plucked Tim Ryan out of the way, and she was about ready to pluck Pete Buttigieg out of the way. I remember that, and it was kind of funny how she was doing it. And everybody was telling me, I started to defend her hard when Hillary Clinton attacked her as a Russian asset, and I was like, $50 million lawsuit, slap that $50 million on that bitch. I mean, sorry, but I was like, you go and you make Hillary feel uncomfortable, because I blame Hillary personally for losing a lot of friends in 2016 who got mad at me for supporting Bernie. They not just didn't get mad at me for voting for Jill Stein on election day. They got mad at me for supporting Bernie over
Yeah.
literally. I've had several people that told me basically to fuck off, and some people just deleted me, blocked me. I mean, and it was just depressing how people try to make Hillary Clinton look like some victim when Trump won in 2016, and then this ridiculous Russia gate. I'm no fan of Putin. I'll make that clear. Even though I've been called that, I'm not. I wouldn't vote for him in Russia. I would have voted for Mikhail Gorbachev's party called Just Russia today, which is the remnants of the old Social Democratic Party. But the point is, and and do you know that the Communist Party is the second largest party in Russia today in the parliament?
Yeah, I did know that.
Okay, yeah,
That's really interesting. Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting. But
Yeah.
anyway, getting back to what I was saying, they made her out to be a victim. I'm like, she's worth $250 million. Nobody's a victim if boo-hoo, she didn't become president. I don't want Trump as president, but it's just like, what is it that people were just going around with making her out to be a victim? But getting back to
it's really, and she's behaved like such a poor sport. She's been such a sore loser, and really just vile in general. And I find it so disgusting how in 2016 she tried to cynically portray herself as woke, and Bernie as being just like the candidate of white male Bernie bros, and just ignoring her long history of race baiting, of homophobia, and she's continued to be transphobic since she lost in 2016. Yes. It just is so revealing to me, the mindset of the sorts of her base, and of the sorts of people who really just have like a shallow commitment to any kind of social justice, and just how it was just also so cynical. And yeah, she is the most vile candidate. I mean, she's just behaved so horribly since 2016, and really, honestly, in a lot of ways, she's cut from the same cloth as Trump, I think.
Yeah, the dirty little secret is that the Clintons were not just friends with Donald Trump; they encouraged Donald Trump to run in 2016.
Yeah,
and I have been called a conspiracy nut for saying that, but it's true. I don't think that the Clintons went up to Trump and be like, "Hey, I think you ought to run to disrupt the Republican primary, make it very easy for my wife Hillary to win." I don't think that Bill Clinton did that, but I do think he was playing golf with Trump, and he was like, "Hey, Donald, I think I'm just speaking hypothetically. Maybe if you were to run in a primary, it could help out Hillary." And if she becomes president, you could probably have $20 billion theoretically, because I mean, it's something along this sort of thinking. I'm just thinking how Bill Clinton would think and all of that. But
no, that makes sense. Actually, it's kind of funny. I did see someone comment that their Pied Piper strategy failed, and that is interesting. That in 2016 they elevated Trump because they thought he would lose, and it utterly backfired. And what I do find interesting, though, is that since then, like at the state level and at the senatorial level, the Pied Piper strategy has actually worked somewhat for Democrats. Like, they've pushed candidates like Herschel Walker, who lost big time. A lot of candidates have lost over the abortion issue in particular, and this guy Marino in Ohio, who just won the Senate nomination, I think is such a hardliner on abortion that he's likely to lose to Sherrod Brown, even in a state like Ohio that has trended increasingly red. But I do think that I do think that it's interesting that, that strategy works at the down ballot level, but with Trump, it backfired because Hillary was such a uniquely awful candidate, and clearly Trump was able to tap into something for better or worse. I mean, obviously for worse, but it just goes to show how clueless and cynical they were, that they thought it would work against him.
Now, I want to backtrack a second because I forgot to mention this with regard to what went wrong for Bernie in 2020, and then I'll try to touch on everything else here. With Bernie Sanders, I think that there were two voices in that campaign that had conflicting strategies. For better or worse, as much as I oppose the duopoly, do I think that Ro Khanna is one of the better Democrats in Congress, in spite of my criticism of the duopoly and my occasional criticism of Ro Khanna? Yeah, I would say he's just a little bit better, but I do think that he had a role, as well-meaning as it would have been. I do think he had a role in Bernie Sanders being more cautious than in 2020. And you contrast that with someone like Brianna Joy Gray, who was the National Press Secretary, who sounded like not demeanor-wise, but ideologically sound as charged up as Bernie Sanders in the 1980s as a mayor. And you contrast that, and I think she was ultimately right to tell Bernie Sanders, do not drop out. You extract as much concessions as you can from Biden. And I think that unfortunately Bernie Sanders listened a little more to Ro Khanna than he listened to Brianna Joy Gray. I just think that as the cheating went on, Bernie, I think that he, in his back of his mind, felt like he caused Trump to win. I mean, James Carville said that recently. He was just like, I don't want to relitigate the 2016 election, but Bernie Sanders is the reason why Trump got won. I mean, kind of like, God, I hate James Carville.
Yeah. He's the worst. And that's like such gaslighting too. I don't want to relitigate the 2016 election, but I'm going to relitigate it. I just don't want, any leftist to respond. He's such a blowhard.
He's an asshole. And somebody brought up, hey, Warren, I don't know if that person's talking to my friend Warren or referring to Elizabeth Warren by the last name. But, I tell people, we don't call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas around these parts. We call her the snake. She's a fucking snake. She also played a role in Bernie Sanders getting fucked over because she was in the primaries long enough in Massachusetts to hurt Bernie. And she didn't even do all that well in the primaries in her own home state, and I will never forgive her for what she did. And the kids sit there and call him a sexist. You remember when she basically asserted that he was a misogynist on the stage in one of the debates?
Yeah, that was so infuriating. That was definitely one of the turning points for the worst in Bernie's campaign, because until then, I had actually kind of had some respect for Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I didn't support her, but I was glad that both her and Bernie were on stage, because it meant that there was a, earnest discourse going on, about like competing leftist ideas. And I obviously tended to agree with Bernie more, but I thought it was great to have both of them up there. And, my working assumption was that when the time came, if it looked like she was going to win the nomination, Bernie supporters would go over to her. I mean, I know I would have. And if it looked like Bernie was going to win the nomination, her supporters would go over to him. But yeah, it turned out that she was, very snake-like and really was not all that committed to leftist ideas. And I think that, that kind of caused me to go back and look at her history again, because, she was at one time a Reagan Republican. And what, it sort of indicated to me is that she's someone who maybe, is just an opportunist, someone who will latch on to whatever the politics of the moment are. Because if she had actually been committed to progressive ideas, she wouldn't have, engaged in that petty sniping with Bernie, and she would have dropped out and encouraged her supporters to endorse him, because that really was such a betrayal, and I felt like a dupe because I had stood up to her, and I really feel like I actually owe an apology to all of the Bernie Sanders supporters who had always been distrustful of her, because it turned out that in the end they were right.
Yeah, I was fairly charitable during the 2020 campaign toward her. My second choice, again, I regret it, but my second choice was Tulsi Gabbard. But here's a little good news about Tulsi. If she's Trump's VP pick, which I don't think that's going to happen because Republicans want Christians, she's Hindu. It's not going to happen. But if it happens, strangely enough, her father, Michael Gabbard, said he would not approve of her being Trump's running mate. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Again, I lost my mind. I had meltdowns, and I'm still pissed off to this day. I have criticized Bernie in a lot of ways lately too, because I felt like he's been a little too close to Joe Biden for my comfort. But I mean, he's proposed a 32-hour work week. He did come up with a solution to the rail workers. He did. Unfortunately, that bill didn't pass where they would be guaranteed 7 sick leave days and all of that. And some people in 2024 is like, where is the Bernie movement today? As somebody who was a Bernie bro, Bernie or bust, obviously, I'm presented with these options. If I still believe in the Democratic Party, there would have been, Marianne Williamson. Dean Phillips is saying some nice things, but he's also a normie Democrat, which I'm a little uneasy about. Shank Uger running, that was silly. I mean, why didn't he just get behind Marianne Williamson?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Cornel West, he's got an independent campaign. And I was strongly on the Cornel West bandwagon for a while. I'm not against Cornel West. I just don't know if I'm going to vote for him or Jill Stein in North Carolina, or Bill Stodden, or even the PSL candidate Dela Cruz, Claudia Dela Cruz. Who am I going to vote for? It remains to be clear. I mean, I'm not voting for Biden or whoever's the stand-in candidate. I'm not voting for Trump, obviously, either. But I'm sort of presented where to go, and I think that the left is sort of where we were at back in the days of Tumblr in 2014. So where are you in? Not necessarily who you're going to vote for in November, but where are you at as far as the 2024 election?
I mean, I feel pretty disheartened about it in general. I absolutely despise Biden for legitimizing war crimes in Israel. I could not in good conscience vote for him, so I am going to vote for Cornel West in New York. I will say that if I lived in a swing state, I would hold my nose and vote for Biden. And part of that is really just because I genuinely do think Project 2025 is terrifying, and it's terrifying to think how much worse things could be for trans people under Trump, but I'm not happy about it. I think that on foreign policy, though, things are going to be bad either way. But long term, I really think that I think the left is in a better place now than it was in 2014 because there has been this shift in consciousness and there is stronger union organizing. And I do think that the prospects for the left ultimately and the ability to build independent power will be stronger under a second Biden term. And that's not because I expect anything from Biden, but it's more just because I feel that when a Democrat is in power, the left is less likely to be forced into some sort of a popular front coalition with liberals. And I feel like liberals, under a Republican presidency, liberals tend to dominate the discourse. And I feel that I feel that they become less dominant in a way when there is a Democrat in power, and part of that is because it's obvious to more people that both parties are corrupt, and there isn't as much just immediate urgency in terms of like how much worse things would get under Trump. Like, I mean, and under a second Trump term, I feel like we would just get into the same old, Russiagate style shit. You would see more like liberals trying to work with neocons and such. I really think that it's best that we just move beyond the Trump era and hopefully are able to work on building something better. But all that is to say that I absolutely detest Biden, and I think that what's going on in Gaza needs to be fought against tooth and nail, and also, like I said, we need to focus on building stronger labor unions and worry a bit less in general about electoralism, at least in the short term.
Yeah, I take this position. I tell people that I was telling Dan Perlman this, that when it comes to the Democratic Party, I do take now these days a position not that far removed from a Jimmy Dore's critique. However, I'm less judgmental. I do not believe in the two-party system at all anymore, and I'm not criticizing those who do, that wants to fight the good fight. It's just a personal decision, and so I'm a registered Green Party member, and I think I actually think that the long-term goal for the left is to create some kind of a labor party. That's what I always wanted from day one. And the fact that we don't have one, a viable labor party in this country, is the reason why America can't have nice things. Because, I think that the Republicans are for sure flirting with fascism. Not every Republican, but I do think overall, I mean, my gosh, the guy that's running in North Carolina, Mark Robinson. Are you familiar with Mark Robinson?
Oh my God, yeah, he's frightening.
Michael Figueredo for the Humanist Report said this guy is so far gone that he makes Marjorie Taylor Greene sound reasonable. I mean, and that's probably almost true, and that's scary as hell that he could win. I'm still going to go for the Green Party candidate, Wayne Turner, because I felt like I've been let down so much over the years. But here's the thing. I think that wherever the left goes, I would say it's not his fault. His fault was happened, the drawbacks. It's just the system is rigged in it, where you can't have someone like Bernie Sanders is perceived as, maybe not perceived as dangerously radical today, but still perceived as a little further left than what America should be according to our Overton window. But if you put him in the UK, he would actually be he'll be slightly to the right of Jeremy Corbyn.
I mean, yeah, that's true, yeah.
And he's not even Jeremy Corbyn's not even a dangerous revolutionary or what have you, but they had a transformation of their Overton window, and it went further right. Their Overton window is still slightly to the left of America, but it's not by a whole lot these days.
Yeah, and one of the cynical trends I've noticed that kind of relates to that in both the American media and the British media is just this cynical tendency to portray everything they don't like as populism. And I think all that is just a lazy attempt to conflate the left and the far right. Like they'll talk about the dangers of populist movements when it's like, no, they actually should be talking about the dangers of fascist movements, and just the notion that Bernie or Corbyn are just remotely equivalent to, like, Gert Wilders or Trump or Orban. It's like, let's see, one side wants to ethnically cleanse Europe and the US, and destroy the planet. The other side thinks everyone should have a decent standard of living and that we have enough in the world for everybody. And yet to centrists, the two are just the same. And that mindset is part of what drove the opposition to Bernie among like the center right establishment types, and in England much of the opposition to Corbyn as well.
Yeah, and I'm just sick to the pit of my stomach on how he's been unfairly demonized. I mean, it's kind of a blanket, and it's probably a little broad to say this, but to sit there and accuse Jeremy Corbyn of being anti-Semitic, the man's on the left. If you're on the left, no matter how pissed off you are with Israel, if you're on the left, you find the idea of anti-Semitism as primitive, right wing, just something of medieval in this most evil, darkest ways. And so, it's not going to be true about the left. And nobody ever take into account that Theresa May, who I don't think she's a homophobe, I don't think she's anti-Catholic, but she reached out to a political party in Northern Ireland called the Democratic Unionist Party, which is affiliated with the late Ian Paisley, the Protestant minister that was behind the discrimination against Irish Catholics in Northern Ireland. She reached out to them, and nobody calls her out on reaching out to homophobes and anti-Catholic types. And if you're anti-Catholic and you're homophobic, that anti-Semitism is kind of around the corner.
Yeah, so. and also literal terrorists. I mean, they were connected to the Protestant far-right terrorists in Northern Ireland. And that's what's so fundamentally hypocritical as well, is that Corbyn was accused of, supporting terrorists just spuriously partly because he was critical of Israel as well. And so that's what's just so maddening about it too. And yeah, to your point about anti-Semitism, this is what I often will say to people when people will talk about anti-Semitism on the left. I just point out anti-Semitism, when it does appear on the left, is a bug. On the far right, it's a feature.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just exists. Some people are on the left, but it's definitely more of a right wing phenomenon. It's always been right wing. I don't mean normie conservative right wing or anything like that, but I do think it's always been associated more with the right. And no matter how much the right on Fox News wants to paint it out, or some of these talking heads, and all of that. So somebody whose name I'm not going to mention last night made a kind of a sarcastic dig, told me that with Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro sparring out over Israel, which is why she got presumably canned from the Daily Wire. This certain person we both know said, Oh, that means she can now join up or team up with the Gray Zone. I was like, why would Candace Owens and the Gray Zone team up with each other? They're civil libertarians and free
Yeah.
speech absolutists. She's not. Uh, they support socialism. She opposes socialism. I don't, other than non-interventionism, there's really no overlap you can make with the Great So and Candace Owens. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's complete insanity.
I will initial this person's name, MS. So
Noted.
okay, but anyhow, yeah, I just thought that's mental,
That is delusional. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Candace Owens, yeah, she's wow, it's funny to see the conservative fault lines between Ben Shapiro obviously being racist and her being anti-Semitic. That's the funny thing about the far right is when their internal bigotry is just like that's we have plenty of leftist infighting, but I guess that's where the far right infighting comes. Like who's when they have people who are just bigoted against each other.
Well, it's the we're veering off into another subject here with this, but basically, I think she's chartering a lane for herself, and she wants to be part of that Tucker Carlson sort of. She's sort of moving away from the neocon nonsense of Ben Shapiro, wants to move into the more of a paleo conservative direction. I think that's I mean, they're all a bunch of grifters. In other words, I know that's a word that's overused and everything, but I just wanted to actually touch on that. This is kind of a little more levity situation to kind of conclude. Do you have any final thoughts?
Not off the top of my head. I think we've covered it pretty well, but I have really enjoyed this discussion, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm sure there'll be something else that's going to be like a burning issue where we can have this as a discussion, whatever it is as a discussion and everything. So, um, it's not going to be. I think the last normal election was 2012.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, because Obama, other than being the first African American president, he was just another redundant Democrat. So it was basically what passed for shit liberty in 2012 versus what passed for Bush Cheney neoconservatism.
Yeah, I
So
mean, Romney was the last candidate of the old Republican establishment that was able to get the nomination, and I think that after McCain and Romney were unable to defeat the first black president, the right just radicalized, and they that is partly why they all got on board with Trump.
yeah. So and I want to make this clear that not everybody that votes for Trump is some deplorables like Hillary claims. We just have to go and find a way to convince people who voted for Trump because they were wanting the jobs to come back to the United States or what have you. I mean, there's those types, the ones that voted for Obama twice. They're not terrible people. I will argue that maybe some libertarian leaning Republicans who's a part of the coalition are not terrible people. The worst part of MAGA are the ones who I consider the Bush Cheney faction. They just follow whatever Republican leaders in charge at the moment just to trigger the libs. And that's, I basically think that the core of what is ugly about MAGA were really Ted Cruz supporters from 2016. Or
Yeah, I
people who
agree.
Bachman in 2012.
Oh yeah, that definitely the Tea Party far right lunatic base. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. Although I hate Michelle Bachmann and I hate Sarah Palin, I have to owe them an apology because Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, more Marjorie Taylor Greene than Lauren Boebert, are just such precise nutcases.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So they're both terrible. But anyway, let's see. Let me go ahead and make my quick announcements real quick here. Everyone, tonight at midnight is the secret show with Warren and Jimmy. They'll be back tonight, and you should check out the secret show if you haven't yet. Joey, it's a great show.
Oh, I'd
Great.
love to. Yeah, definitely. Is that on Twitch?
It's on YouTube. And my friends, Warren, Uncle Warren, and Jimi Sunderland are the co-hosts of the secret show, and they're pretty hilarious together. They got a good chemistry. Yeah, it's a little bit of
Awesome. I'll
politics,
check it out.
a little bit of entertainment. You kind of get a little bit of it all. And I watch their show every Saturday nights. So it'll be on at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time. So
Cool.
everyone, be sure to I'll be back on Tuesday with Jimmy, and we'll do another episode of Braglands. We're going to have Dolores Pierce from Around the World with Dee and Friends as our guest. And what else is going on? If I stream somewhere in between. So there is also that. If you all like what you heard, please press like and comment any way you disagree with what I have to say. Feel free to share this content. As the First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we're the muckrakers of our time. Subscribe to the Willie Bragg Show, subscribe to Braglands, and follow both programs on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. You get it. And reject corporate media, free Palestine, free Julian Assange, free healthcare for all, and free speech. Any final words, Joey?
Follow me on Twitter at Joe Mulk, or feel free to send me a friend request on Facebook. My name is the same as it is on here. This has been fun. Peace out.
And I forgot to put your information on the description box. I will do it this evening. And if you want to stick around for a moment after I signed off, I talk for a minute. So, okay, everyone, I am out of here. Y'all take care. See y'all next time.